So I hear from a lot of Democrats who are getting discouraged, but I got news for them. Now is not the time to get discouraged. Let's talk about it in today's video. Hi, I'm Mike Greiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. I'm also a lawyer and an academic, and I'm here to help you stand up to the BS of the MAGA crowd. So like you, I've been agonizing over the past month or so as I've seen polling shift from being basically a favorable environment for Democrats to being a more favorable environment for Republicans. Am I worried? The answer is yes. Am I discouraged? The answer is no. The worst thing that could happen to us right now is to sit back. Let's just talk about what the polling data actually shows. First, let's take a look at the report here from NBC about their latest poll.
We begin tonight with new CBS News polling on the midterms. Our Battleground Tracker poll shows Republicans in the lead in the race to control the U.S. House. Our polling estimates Republicans will win 224 seats in the House to the Democrats' 211. That's more than enough for the GOP to take back the majority. We have you covered on many key races with my CBS News colleague.
Okay, let's just point out here, that's pretty close, which for all this talk about how this was going to be a wave election year is not so much of a wave. I mean, that's only a shift of really a couple of seats, but that's the problem, is that the margin is so narrow here that literally if the Democrats lose a couple of seats one way or another in the House, or one seat for that matter in the Senate, it shifts control of these chambers. So it just shows how much everything is on the razor's edge right now. Let's keep watching.
Colleagues, Anthony Salvanto is in New York City, Nicole Killian is in Atlanta, and Ed O'Keefe will join us from the White House. Let's begin, though, with Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto. Anthony, these numbers are striking. What's behind this estimate Republicans lead in the battle for control of the House?
Hey there, Scott. Look, it's so important. I just loaded this graphic before we even started talking. It's that people say the economy is getting worse. What's happened is...
Now, this is probably the least surprising piece of information that I've seen in any polling data in a long time. If anything, I'm surprised that that's such a low number. I mean, it's pretty much accepted that the economy is getting worse. And in fact, the Federal Reserve is trying to make it worse so that they're able to slow down inflation. The economy has been overheated. And so the way to get rid of inflation is to slow it down. And that's what the Fed's trying to do. So let's keep watching now.
That every time we've done a battleground tracker since the baseline we did back in the summer, the Republicans have been losing some ground to the Democrats, but that stopped. It's stabilized now since the last month, and this is why, because people's views of the economy have gotten worse. And the other thing that I want to point out is people say that gas prices in their area are going up now, and
that's really the key here. And this is really what's so disturbing, actually, to kind of watch this, which is that you can track almost the way Democrats are doing directly with how gas prices are going. Gas prices are going up, Dems do worse. Gas prices go down, Dems do better. I'd like to think that part of the reason that Dems were doing better over the summer was because of the fact that people were outraged over Roe v. Wade and its overturning in the Dobbs decision. But now that we see that people are kind of shifting back towards Republicans, it appears that actually the closer link is with gas prices, which are something that, frankly, the president has very little control over. And it's kind of disturbing that we would trade our rights, and for that matter, our democracy, just to be able to have cheaper gas, even though our vote won't affect it in that way. Kind of puzzling to me, but let's keep watching.
Change from the summer. The other part of that, though, Scott, I should add is, when you talk about the economy and the Republicans doing better, you need to understand why people might connect the two politically. And so it's this. I ask people, who's responsible for that? And there are...
Okay, here's an interesting data point here. 48% of the people say it's the Democrats' fault that the economy is worse. Guess what? Those are the Republicans. The people who say that they don't know whose fault it is, those are probably the unaffiliated independents, people who tend to lean Democratic but aren't totally committed. And then the group who say that it's not the Democrats' fault tend to be the Democrats. I mean, one thing that we've seen repeatedly has been the fact that the way that we perceive the economy is based upon our partisan views. So is this a data point that I wish were different? Of course. The problem is that in this partisan environment, you're always going to be a similar data point, given the fact that people actually perceive the economy based upon what political party they support. Let's keep watching.
Far more people who feel like Democratic policies have harmed the economy more than they've helped it. They're in power. That's how people reason. They're feeling the pinch, so they're going to, at least some of them are going to blame the party in power, Scott.
Again, it's worth noting this is not a majority who blame the Democrats for it. It's quite a telling point here, actually, for all the talk about how the economy is causing this. Let's keep watching.
There was that moment in August where abortion rights seemed to transcend the economy in a special election in New York and in some of the polling. Has that moment evaporated?
Well, let's look at this. Take the people who say that abortion is very important in their vote, and those numbers have stabilized, in fact, even gone down a little bit. 59% in September, 54% now.
54%, in other words, more than a majority of people are still saying that abortion is a very important issue in determining how they vote. So for all this talk about how this issue has faded, has it faded a little? Well, maybe, but that's not being shown in these numbers here that they're talking about. Really, the only data point that we've seen that kind of explains any kind of shift, really, is the perception of gas prices. Let's keep watching.
What I think that tells you politically is we know that Democrats are motivated on this. We know that there are strong numbers for Democratic votes among those who say it's very important. However, they've been trying to make this election more about the abortion issue, and this suggests that the economy is swamping that a little bit right now. It's always been a question of what is this election about, and that economy versus the abortion split starts to tell the tale, Scott.
Anthony Salvanto in New York.
Well, number one, that was actually a CBS News poll, so I apologize to CBS for saying that it was an NBC News poll. There's another NBC News poll here that we'll take a look at it in a second. So let's now take a look at some of this overall polling data, because one thing that we've learned is that you can't just take one poll at face value. The best way to try to analyze how public opinion is overall is by doing what's called aggregating of polls. And probably the best known poll aggregator is a website called 538. They've been very strong in terms of what their findings have been. And let's see what they say here. So, number one, they're still saying that the Democrats are slightly favored to win the Senate, which is good. They're also saying that Republicans are favored to win the House, but Democrats are not completely ruled out here. There's still a 20% chance that Democrats will win the House as well. Would I prefer these numbers to be better for Democrats? Of course I would. But it just shows that this race is not over by any stretch of the imagination, and people who've just kind of thrown up their hands are buying into a false narrative that's coming out of the news. So let's take a look at some other polling data here. And what this is the generic ballot. Now, as you can see, when they average all the different polls, there was a period there where the Democrats were leading the Republicans. And recently, that shifted, where the Republicans have overtaken the Democrats. Now where it's 45.1 to 44.6%. A very, very narrow lead. Now, it's worth remembering one thing, by the way. There actually is a scenario where the Democrats actually could end up losing the popular vote and yet still winning the House. And that has to do with the way that the Republicans engaged in their gerrymandering. What they ended up doing in many places is basically shoving a bunch more Republican votes into certain districts that were Republican to make them go from lean Republican to solid Republican. But what that ended up doing is shifting a bunch of other Democratic-leaning districts into being more Democratic-leaning. So there actually is a scenario where, because of the way that all the votes have been gathered in one place, that the Democrats could actually do better than expected. Now let's go down here and take a look at this. And this is where things are going to start to get interesting. Now look at some of these different polls. All of these are recent. Okay, this one, October 16th through 20th. This is by a group called Rasmussen, and they find Republicans leading by 4. This one from Emerson College shows Republicans leading by 5. Also in the same period. This one, also in the same period, by YouGov, finding Democrats leading by 3. This one over here, by Ipsos, which is sponsored by Reuters, the news service, find Democrats leading by 1. This one here. Now, this is where it starts to get interesting. So the point that you can see from all these things that we already talked about here is it's close. It's extremely close. For us to throw up our hands and say, oh, it's over, you're missing the point here. This is a close race. The fact that the Democrats are so close at this point in a midterm election where we should be getting blown out of the water is really saying something. Now let's go down and take a look at this poll. This is from by YouGov, sponsored by The Economist. And here they have 1,110 likely voters, and they find Republicans leading by 1. Here they find the same poll among registered voters finds Democrats leading by 1. This is October 16th through 18th, so very recent still. Let's continue down here. Here's one by Hart Research, very well-known polling firm, sponsored by NBC News. That's what messed me up earlier when I thought that they were talking about an NBC News poll rather than CBS. And what it shows, again, this is a relatively recent poll, October 14th through 18th, and what it shows is among likely voters, Republicans are leading by 1. Among registered voters, Democrats are leading by 1. So what we see emerging here between those two polls is a story, which is that Republicans are more motivated to get out and vote. If the Democrats get out our voters, we actually lead. And so what's the message here that we as Democratic activists should be taking from this? It means we need to get out there and get out the vote. We need to make sure that people remember what is at stake in this election. Gas prices are going to go up, they're going to go down. That's not something that government has a whole lot of control over, is the reality. But what's at stake in this election is abortion, voting rights, and democracy, for crying out loud. And that's what people need to be voting on. That's what they need to remember, and that's why they need to get out and vote. So we as Democrats need to be spreading that message far and wide and not throwing up our hands and losing faith that the outcome has already been decided. Well, if you need more information to counter these claims that Democrats are bad for the economy, check out this video I did over here a little while ago. It turns out that the research is quite clear. Democrats are better for the economy than Republicans. I'll see you then. In the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.